Tariffs are paused. Markets are skyrocketing right now. And for those who are predicting doom and gloom, and this is the worst domestic policy decision of your lifetime, well, how's it look now? Because, as you probably just heard in the top of the hour news update there, the countries, the 75 or so that have already reached out and started the negotiation process, they've all had their tariffs paused, the reciprocal part of them, and moved down to, what was that, 10%? And so 10% tariff in place on pretty much every country out there that was getting kicked in the head with these tariffs to begin with, except for China. Yes, China is a holdout. And over the last 24 hours, it's been a classic move here where China said, okay, well, if you're going to raise your tariffs on us, then we're going to raise them on you. So Donald Trump at midnight put some new tariffs on China. When I woke up this morning, China had placed a new 84% tariff on the 8 things that they import from America. And then Donald Trump came back. He's like, fine, we'll put 104% on China. Meanwhile, everyone else gets paused. Now, that is already making the news. The second it hit Wall Street, things just took off. The Dow is up 6.3%. That's like 2,400 points. It's already made up almost half of what it lost in the entire downturn since it broke the record back in February. And I know you've been told that this is catastrophic, this is terrible, this is Sodom and Gomorrah, this is dogs and cats living together. The market was going to crash, never to return. Kids are going to be running around without shoes, wearing burlap sacks for clothes. But that was a whole week ago, y'all. And even with, when you look at where the Dow is now, this takes you all the way back. For those of you who are crying about people's wealth is being destroyed or retirement being destroyed, oh no, you're all the way back to the desperate times that we were at in around October. And you remember how awful October was? Yeah, that was real economic catastrophe we were in. Yeah, not bad at all. So that's kind of the point I've been making for the last 5 shows. No one knows what this was going to end up like, how long the timetable was. Of course, if you take the worst case scenario and giant tariffs and barriers of trade stay up for years on end, of course that would grind the economy to a halt. But that's no one's long-term goal. Even Trump said it himself. Carolyn Levitt said it. These were a negotiation tactic to get better trade deals from these countries that have an imbalanced trade setup as it is. All right, so you can hear it from Carolyn Levitt herself. She walked out in front of the White House with Scott Bessent behind her. There's a gaggle of reporters, and this is the update from her about an hour ago.
Regarding his America First trade plan, as you all know, the president just put out a statement announcing an additional tariff on China. The tariff on China will now go up to 125%. Because China imprudently decided to retaliate against the United States. And as I said at the podium yesterday, when you punch at the United States of America, President Trump is going to punch back harder. In that same vein, we have had more than 75 countries from around the world reach out to President Trump and his team here at the White House to negotiate better trade deals for the American worker. We have been overwhelmed with the amount of requests from countries around the world. I'll let the secretary speak to that.
Yeah, well, let me let Donald Trump speak to that. This was yesterday. Donald Trump, in not quite as artful terms as Carolyn Levitt just put it, pretty much said the same thing. Pardon the language here.
I'm telling you, these countries are calling us up, kissing my ass. They are dying to make a deal. Please, sir, make a deal. I'll do anything. I'll do anything, sir.
So he wasn't kidding. That was him yesterday, and then here they are in this position. Another clip from Carolyn Levitt a little over an hour ago.
Good, thank you. And we saw the successful...
Oh, no, this is... Already went on to Scott Bessent. Sorry, I didn't have time to label all these because I just recorded it. So Scott Bessent's laying out. This is your Treasury Secretary.
Good, thank you. And we saw the successful negotiating strategy that President Trump implemented a week ago today. It has brought more than 75 countries forward to negotiate. It took great courage for him to stay the course until this moment. And what we have ended up with here, as I told everyone a week ago, they are in this very spot. Do not retaliate, and you will be rewarded.
And so it sounds like they're living up to that promise. Now, the question-answer session was great. Do we have a better White House press pool? Are they like excluding the hacks? Because the guy that comes out and asks the first question asked actually the first question I was thinking of, and it might be the first question you're thinking of. Wait, so we're pausing tariffs on all these countries except for China. Does that include the big ones, Mexico and Canada? And he misspeaks here, but you'll hear it clean up.
First of all, Mexico and China, are they part of this 10% universal?
China.
Mexico and Canada. Mexico and Canada, are they part of the 10%?
Yes.
Okay. Second, given then that you have the rest of the world essentially calling it, it's not China, is this now just all about China?
Well, it's about bad actors, and what we will see is some of the very early countries are China's neighbors. That we're going to see. I'm seeing Vietnam today. Japan's at the front of the queue. South Korea, India. So we will see.
See, so if China holds out, but all these other countries, especially the ones around them, don't, then we don't need China anymore. We can just make our Nikes in India or something. Vietnam. They can do sweatshops too. So this looks like a quick victory here. I don't think it's too early to take a little bit of a victory lap, but it's not the calamity you were told about. It's not the calamity you were promised. I was actually going to talk to you in my little economics segment about how last night Donald Trump hinted that after this whole tariff spat is over and resolved, that his next target is going to be targeted tariffs on pharmaceuticals. And I haven't even really gotten to touch that because let's digest what's going on here. Bill Dindy, financial strategist here in DFW, is on for this segment. Look, we have the tariffs paused for pretty much everybody but China. The markets are already back up and recovered about 7% to the positive today. Your thoughts, Bill Dindy?
Phenomenal day. And it's very much, as we discussed earlier this week, that it looks like tariffs are a negotiation tool. Yet when Trump brings them out, he can't say, hey, I'm just faking it. I'm going all in, but I don't really think we're going to have to show our cards here. We're pushing in to see if they'll back off, if we can bring them to the table. And that's exactly what we saw happen today. I call a lot of people off guard because it happened so quickly, but it's part of the negotiation. You can't show your hand, and to keep things off balance enables a better deal. So I think that there are a number of people who are upset that this is playing with their emotions, playing with their 401k, perhaps playing with the overall economics. But I think those who said we're going into an economic nuclear winter have way overstated things and didn't understand where we were coming from to begin with.
Amen to that. Now, would you say because we had talked about if you're disappointed with the way your portfolio performed in the downturn, whenever you get back to being made whole, you might want to do some reallocation and move some money away from like risky stocks and get into things that don't plunge every time the market plunges. Are we to that position yet to where we can start to rebalance or reallocate?
Well, absolutely. We're still within 10 to 15% of all-time market highs. So you got the center out of that watermelon if you're going to go ahead and move from the market. If you've been there the last 5 years or so, you've doubled your money. Last 2 years, we're up over 30%. So it's not a terrible time if you say, I just don't like it. It made me queasy. I can't stand it. To say, let's go ahead and pull back on the throttle. Let's take a little bit less risk here. We can still get reasonably good returns on fixed income. Remember all those years we were only getting 2 and 3% on our CDs and fixed income? Well, now we're back up to 4, 5, 6% on investment grade bonds and very safe type investments relative to the stock market, less volatile perhaps, and things that have maturity dates where as long as the companies stay in business, our FDIC remains, we're going to get our CDs paid out. So it's not a bad time to reallocate if you have discomfort and if this had bothered you along the way. Because if you didn't like the 10 and 15% declines, you're sure not going to like a 35 or 40% decline, which the market can do. We saw it in the year 2000. We saw it in the year 2008. It's very capable of, in a normal downturn, losing 30 to 40% of value from its highs. So I agree with you. It's not a terrible time to reallocate if you didn't love what just happened.
Well, where do you go then besides, the normal old stock bond mix when we've talked about going to safer stuff that's less volatile? I know a lot of people are hesitant to use the scary word annuities, but, what's something like that?
And that's a big category. A lot of people don't realize how big that category is, and that you have fixed annuities, which are basically loans to an insurance company. So as long as they're strong and safe and paying their loans on time and paying their interest and principal back, it's like a loan. It's not the bad ones people talk about. You just want to make sure that you understand the term of how long, and that the annuity is a retirement type vehicle that has the early penalties if you take the money out prior to 59.5, but it also has tax deferral and some creditor protections here in Texas. So it's got the pluses and minuses to it, and that's kind of the key with most investments. There's no perfect investment. They all seem to have their pluses and minuses, and the key is to find the one with the pluses you really, really like with the minuses you can live with. My wife says it's like picking a spouse. And I'm like, what? I got minuses? And she says, hey, I can live with them. So I'm grateful for that. And it's the same with our investment portfolios. Annuities can be part of building a portfolio, but beware. Sometimes people who represent annuities, that's all they're representing, and they'll place everything in an annuity, and it may not be the right kind. So you got to shop. You got to do your homework. It's nice to work with someone who can do the annuities or the bonds or the stocks or the mutual funds or the real estate or the commodities. And if they can offer almost anything available, you know that they're not at least incentivized to do one versus the other, because that's all that they do for a living.
The other thing that I think is going to affect everyone's pocketbook probably the most is dropping these tariffs on Canada and Mexico. I think we're probably going to be the big drivers of price hikes, you know, whether it's a builder trying to get timber from Canada or one of the bazillion things we get that's made in Mexico. Is this going to dent the increase of prices that we were expecting?
Well, absolutely, because so much of this thought of the American consumer will be bearing the additional cost of tariffs and won't have as much money to consume other things. That's removed if we don't have to pay the higher tariffs on the automobile parts that come from Mexico, or the timber from Canada, or the fruits and vegetables, or tequila and beer from Mexico. And so this is a positive thing for the U.S. consumer and for the economy as a whole. And so we probably won't see those high increases. Now, we've already seen inflation, so the average consumer feels like they've already been hit real hard.
And we have.
Inflation. Yeah. And they already feel like the interest rates have moved up, so their variable rate mortgages and their credit card debt that they're carrying costs more than it used to. And so we didn't want that third punch of tariffs. Well, it looks like we may be relieved of that. We may not get that, but we're still a lot of people digesting the higher cost of things, especially if their wages didn't keep up with the higher cost of everything they're buying.
Well, when we talk about a volatile market, this is what we're talking about. Last week was the biggest drop since the COVID tumble, and now we have the biggest intraday moves upward since 2008. So records are being made all over the place. Where can we find you outside of WBAP, Bill Dindy?
Yeah, we are living in interesting times, and the website is alicorninvestmentmanagement.com. ALICORN.
The tariffs on 75 countries have been paused and brought down to 10%, except for China. China has 125% tariffs. That's an increase since you woke up this morning, because China did a retaliatory tariff at midnight last night when we were sleeping. And the market's just absolutely taken off. The Dow's now up more than 7%. So if I remember correctly, it was around 44,000 at its peak in February. And it's back up above 40,000 now, 40,400 and some change now. So I'll keep an eye on that. The skyrocketing market, these guys, I don't know if they're just so scared yesterday how they can be so happy today. But I'll pass along the information because it's changing in the screen. And the markets will close in about an hour from now, 3:30 our time. We'll have the next chapter of this written. But probably bigger news here in Texas. Big announcement was made last night. I have to give credit to my friends over at the Dallas Express, where I saw it first. Thank you, Chris. But Ken Paxton's made a rumor official now. He will be challenging incumbent Senator John Cornyn for Senate. He's going to primary him. The primary is going to happen next year, and then pretty much whoever wins that, I don't think they really have to worry about losing in the general. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but in a state that's as red as this one is, the primary is the real election. Now, Ken Paxton, is he perfect? Of course not. Is he better than John Cornyn? That's the real question. And It looks like it. I think so. Let's see what WFAA has to say real quick, and then we'll run down some voting records here. And I'll ask you, who you like better, Ken Paxton or John Cornyn? This is WFAA reporting on this last night.
We begin tonight with a showdown that will put Republicans' loyalty to the test.
Yeah, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton just announced he's running for U.S. Senate. Less than 2 weeks after incumbent Senator John Cornyn launched his own re-election campaign.
Teresa Woodard has been covering politics in Texas for more than 20 years. Teresa, these are two different factions going head-to-head.
Yeah, absolutely. Most folks would view John Cornyn as the old guard and Ken Paxton as the new guard. Here's the thing, though. Both are conservative Republicans, and both have held elected positions in Texas for decades. Insiders tell me these guys do not like each other, so voters prepare for this to get ugly.
So let's go through the record here. Why is John Cornyn? It seems odd that this is a guy who's been a senator in Texas since, I think, 2002. I know it was during Bush when he got in there. But he's been in Texas politics since the 80s, going all the way back to being a judge in San Antonio, Bexar County. But we have a guy here who, follows the pattern of once you're in office, once you're the incumbent, they have a tendency to be kind of calcified in there. And we don't really pay enough attention. And I don't mean you and me. I mean, we as a people generally, even in Texas, don't pay enough attention to the primary situation that this guy keeps, getting past the goalie and getting on the ticket again. But he continually ticks people off. John Cornyn has actually been a co-author on a gun control bill. And if that's not enough to get you kicked out of Texas politics, especially in 2025, I mean, what else is it going to take? Well, let's go through some of the other things that we have a big complaint about. It's not, I don't want to act like it's trifling. These are legit concerns, not like, oh, he has mean tweets. But this is a guy who, in his gun control bill, anyone who sells firearms has to register as a firearm licensee. Like anybody. Oh, my goodness. So, is he for universal background checks? I mean, that's a big solid maybe there, because there's not a whole lot of difference. He also called Donald Trump's border wall naive in 2016. He supported the DREAM Act, which gave a pathway to citizenship to people who came here illegally as minors. He's also been a very consistent guy when it comes to war. In 2022, when Russia and Ukraine was still going on, and you and I had seen it for a year and said, no. This is an endless money pit. This is a quagmire. This is the stalemate that we should have never been in the first place, and we need to get out. John Cornyn goes and co-authors the bill that gives him another $90 billion after we had already been there for a year. And, it seems like fantasy without even knowing the context. Hey, we have this tiny country of just a few million people. They're going to take on Russia in a land war in Asia. How's that going to work out? Well, we should fund that. I think they have a chance here. No, there's no scenario in which Ukraine can overcome and defeat Russia without Russia just laying down and giving up. So what are we going to do? Support that forever? That's a John Cornyn position. So there's been a few other things, but and it's so hard to get to the bottom of some of these issues, because when you go and you look at what he puts out, he's like, yes, I have like a 91% rating from the American Conservative Union, and that's higher than the 78% average of all the Republican senators in the Senate. It's like, oh my goodness. That's not an endorsement for you. That's a condemnation on other. There's guys in the Senate who are worse than you that are calling themselves Republican. Besides the Susan Collin and Lisa Murkowski, like, how bad is it in there? Apparently, most of them are worse than John Cornyn. Now, that's not a great positive argument to make him the continuing senator from Texas. But do you have a strong opinion on this? Is there something I'm missing? Is there something I need to know about Ken Paxton? Because it seems to me that this guy has to be better than whatever John Cornyn's been putting up for the last 3 election cycles. He's looking for his 4th. He's been in for what? No, he's already been in for 4. All right, can we get this guy out? And Richard, Fort Worth, what do you think?
Yes, sir. Yeah, He's voted 53% with the Democrats. He's just not a solid conservative Republican.
Now, see,
get some new blood in there.
Can you be more specific? Because I see some people say he's voted 91% with Trump, and that's more than the rest of the senators have done. And then I do see other people saying he votes like X amount of percent of time with the Democrats. And one of y'all's got to be wrong.
No, I apologize, but I didn't look that. I looked this up a couple of years ago when I was trying to get him to not vote on something, and so I found it on there, and I thought, so we called his office. He's always excused us. He's always like taking us for granted and just giving us lip service. He's not. His people don't even really care. So I'm very disappointed in that. I don't have the exact side I thought on.
I think a lot of people go through this. Even me, as a guy who has to talk about this for 3 hours a day for the last 20 years, I have a feeling in my body that I remember John Cornyn betraying our principles in years past. Even though I don't remember specifically what it was, it's the same way we do movies. Like, did you see Goonies when you were a kid?
Oh yes.
Yeah. Great movie, huh?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember one line from the movie? Do you remember what about the movie you liked, or do you just remember the general sense that I remember liking that? I remember it making me feel good, and I bet you if I watched it again that I would like it again. But you don't remember the specifics. That's how we feel about a lot of politicians. And really, you're right on that one, Richard. You don't remember specifically why, but when it happened, when he wrote the $90 billion bill for Ukraine funding, you probably didn't remember that specifically, but it put like another, a notch on your headboard against them. Probably the wrong metaphor, but you know what I mean.
Exactly.
Right. And so when he does that for gun control, when he does that for Ukraine, when he does that for other forever war stuff, whenever he's not standing for the principles, even though you don't remember the specifics, trust your instinct, Richard, because it's right.
Yes, I agree.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. Let's see what other people think. Let's go all the way down to Temple. Davis in Temple. You're on WBAP. What do you think about Paxton versus Cornyn?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great.
Okay, great. Well, I just wanted to put in there that at the last Republican state convention, when John Cornyn got up to speak, he got booed by the people at the state convention, and booed big time. I mean, that just kept on and kept on and kept on booing him while he was talking. And, of course, he just kept on talking anyway, but it was a mass revolt against where he stands. And that his latest deal there was he had put forward and gotten passed or had voted for some Second Amendment red flag laws. So anyway, but he is constant. I remember the last time he ran for election, he drove one of these old decorated buses up here to Temple and put out a speech that was so milquetoast. It was ridiculous. And he doesn't stand for any good, solid Republican priority items. Period.
Well, and he's a perfect avatar for what we're facing in the state legislature right now. We have 36 people who ran as Republicans, wearing the Republican label, using the Republican brand, and then they go down there and they side with the Democrats, and they're not giving you property tax relief. They're not giving you universal school choice. They're not giving you all of the principles that they promised, or at least that the voters expected. I mean, there's a certain level of fraud there, but it keeps happening over and over and over. And at some point, we gotta look at ourselves and be like, can we be better voters about this? Can we actually pay attention this time and get these guys out? And we have to do it in the primaries when the news isn't all over it, when Fox News isn't going to talk about it, or our friends over at other TV stations and radio stations aren't going to commit a whole lot of time to it. We just, at some point, we're going to have to get a little bit more involved and pay a little more attention, or we're going to keep repeating this same mistake of sending rhinos into positions of power.
That is right.
All right. Well, good. I looking at some of the other calls and Facebook messages over here, everyone agrees so far. And I almost feel unfair. There's John Cornyn people that are listening. Have him come on the show and explain himself. I'm not going to bite. I'm not going to sandbag him over here. I would just like to have an honest conversation. Like, doesn't it concern you a little bit that 100% of the people that just called in to the biggest news talk radio station in the state of Texas, where you're trying to run as an incumbent, It was all negative. Wouldn't you like to get in front of that? Wouldn't you like to answer and speak for yourself on why you supported all this spending for Ukraine, on why you've supported gun control bills, on why you've interfered in some of these other legislative priorities? We'd love to have you on. 800-288-9227 if you have anything to add to that. But coming up next, we brought back some extinct animals, dire wolves, which I thought was just a thing from Game of Thrones, but apparently that's a real animal. Okay, so we can bring back extinct animals, but the question is, should we? Should we bring back extinct animals? Did we learn nothing from one of my favorite documentaries, Jurassic Park? I know that's not a documentary, but you'll hear my thoughts next. I'm not so sure this is a good idea, and I'll spell it out coming up on the James Show. If you have any comments on bringing extinct animals back to life, 800-288-9227, 800-288-9227. I'm James Parker. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3.